Imagine you're on patrol deep in the jungles of Vietnam at night, when suddenly, a voice comes out from the trees warning you that danger lies ahead. You and your squad look around, but you can't see anyone. Then, you hear the voice of a child crying out for his father. Then you hear voices coming from all different directions, but you still can't see anyone. This might sound like a scene from a horror movie, but it was actually a psychological operation performed by the US Army against the Viet Cong back in the Vietnam War. Stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to play for you an actual recording of these disembodied voices that the Army used in this PSYOP. So sit back, get comfy in your padded cell as I tell you the true chilling tale of Operation Wandering Soul.
The Vietnam War was different than any other war the United States had ever participated in up until that point. Every other war they had been a part of featured a feud between armies. This conflict, however, was a civil war between a government and an insurgency. One of the most prominent warring parties, the Viet Cong, employed guerrilla warfare, which was something the US wasn't familiar with either, as every other adversary they had faced utilized traditional battle tactics. Guerrilla warfare is a form of unconventional warfare in which small groups of irregular military, such as armed civilians or rebels, are often less trained and have inferior weapons than their opponents, so they shy away from head-on combat. They instead utilize ambushes, raids, and attrition warfare to catch their enemies by surprise or wear them down. The Viet Cong would not engage in open combat. In order for the US to try and beat the Viet Cong at their own game, they had to adopt their own unorthodox methods of warfare. One of the tactics they used was psychological warfare, the practice of demoralizing their adversary by shattering their psychological state, often by targeting their emotions, belief systems, or personal values. One particular PSYOP that was employed by US forces in Vietnam was called Operation Wandering Soul. The goal of this operation was to undercut the morale of the enemy and force surrender without ever firing a shot. In the jungles where Viet Cong factions were known to patrol, the army would broadcast screaming, shrieking, and moaning human voices to scare the Viet Cong into surrendering.
At first, this premise seems silly. Why would screaming voices scare entire groups of armed insurgents? Well, in order for this to make sense, you first need to understand Vietnamese traditions and beliefs regarding their dead.
The Vietnamese believed that the dead must be buried in their homeland or their souls will wander aimlessly in pain and suffering. If a dead person is buried improperly, their soul will continue to wander after death. Vietnamese people honor these lost spirits on an annual holiday called Wandering Souls Day. So a soldier or insurgent who was killed away from home, in battle for instance, would be an example of a wandering soul. The US took advantage of this belief and spent weeks recording spooky voices and sounds, which were meant to be the disembodied voices of slain Viet Cong soldiers warning the others to turn around or face the same fate. These recordings were usually played via loudspeaker in the jungle at night, and sometimes by helicopter, which were meant to represent ancestors of the Viet Cong calling for them to surrender or defect. Though there were many recordings that were used by the US Army, only one has been made available to the public so far. It's called Ghost Tape Number 10. It was first played in the US Army Fire Support Base Chamberlain in South Vietnam. On the night of February 10, 1970, they broadcast the ghostly shrieks into the jungle around the base. Not only did this recording feature screams, but also a message to the Viet Cong. Tortured voices saying things such as, "My friends, I have come back to let you know that I am dead. I am dead." And, "It's hell, I am in hell. Don't end up like me. Go home, friends, before it is too late." And the recording also featured the cries of women and children. Hearing these cries deep in the jungle, but not being able to put a face to them, is surely enough to frighten even the bravest of people. But was this operation even a success? Ultimately, not really. The Viet Cong in most cases did realize the sounds were coming from the Americans, which foiled the entire premise of the affair. In some cases, it was reported that the recordings prompted the soldiers to fall back to retrieve the bodies of their fallen comrades in order to prevent their souls from having to wander for eternity. It was also reported that the civilian population in neighboring villages were deeply disturbed by the recordings and thought they were real. But all in all, Operation Wandering Soul didn't move the needle for the US Army, and the PSYOP was discontinued in the early 70s.
Now, for me personally, I would be terrified hearing these ghostly sounds deep in the forest, but maybe not so much if I had a battle buddy next to me. But just so you can get an idea of how disturbing ghost tape number 10 actually sounds, I'm going to play for you the entirety of the recording, so listen if you dare.
Vợ tôi cứu tôi đây. Bà đang về với con. Tôi đã về với mình đây. Nhưng tôi còn đâu mảnh hình hài nữa. Tôi đã chết rồi mà con đâu ở. Tôi hẳn không biết chừng nào. Các bạn của tôi phải về để nói cho các bạn biết rằng tôi đã chết. Địa ngục, cái chết thật là oan uổng, thật là vô nghĩa. Nhưng lúc tôi biết thì đã quá muộn rồi. Các bạn ơi, các bạn còn sống, còn có ngày các bạn gặp được người thân yêu của các bạn. Các bạn có nghe đừng nói trở về các bạn, muốn mau đi, nhất quyết mau đi, lừa bỏ đi các bạn. Nếu không thì không thể tránh được cái sự cảm thương như tôi. Trở về đi các bạn ơi, nếu không thì quá muộn rồi, quá trễ rồi. Trở về đi, về đi các bạn, về đi.
If you're still here, I want to thank you for your bravery and for tuning in to another video. Please feel free to voluntarily commit yourself to Asinine Asylum by hitting those like and subscribe buttons, and turn on notifications so you can be first in line for more true horror stories like this. That's all for now. Please return to your padded cells, my patients, and I'll see you in the next video.